What's up guys, welcome back to another MOTOBOB video, and today I thought I'd quickly run you through some of the less impressive parts of the Street Twin that I've noticed in the first couple of weeks of owning it, just to balance out my video from the other day where I was talking through the reasons that I bought it. Obviously there's loads of good stuff about this bike, and the positives for me and for the type of riding that I'm doing outweigh the negatives, but I don't think any bike is perfect and can do everything. And let's jump straight in. Front brake is not exactly brilliant. Anyone who's been watching this channel for more than a couple of weeks will know that I was on a 2006 Kawasaki ER6N, so hardly MotoGP standard of brakes on that, but the two discs up front make such a big difference, especially when this bike is carrying a few extra pounds. I don't know the curb weight because Triumph only quote dry weights, but I'd assume it's like 20 or 30 kilos heavier than the ER6, and it's quite noticeable, especially, you know, when people look like they're accelerating or pulling away and then they change their mind and jam the brakes on, as so often happens in city traffic, and you've got to sort of react quickly. Why is he, I mean, he's in his lane. You know, you've got to react quickly, stop running into the back of them, and that's when you notice that the brakes are a little bit on the soft and unresponsive side. Now, of course, brake pads are the first, easiest, cheapest mod you could make to try and improve that, so I'll probably wear these ones out, and then when I replace them, look for something that's a little bit more aggressive. But I was talking to my dad about it, and he was saying, well, if you put more abrasive brake pads on, it's going to wear your disc out quicker, and that's an expensive item to change. I mean, he is a bit close with those buses. Oh shit, there's a lorry coming as well. Let's get out of here. So yeah, I guess that's one thing to be mindful of. Anyone who's got a Triumph has probably come across the Triumph Wrap forum when they've been googling stuff about their bike, and obviously the Street Twin's no exception, and there's quite a lot of recommendations on there for improving the brakes. One is a Brembo kit to convert the front brake into a floating disc and I think a 4-pot caliper. That's about 500 or 600 quid. And then some other folks are saying that they're considering swapping the forks and the front wheel for the T120 front end, so that you can run, you know, 2 discs. Now, this bike's about, what, 8 grand, just less than 8 grand, brand new. And when you start spending 500, 600 quid, or way more probably for the T120 front end, it's going to take the cost of the bike up to something like a T120 or a Thruxton. So unless you've got a really, really good reason for wanting the Street Twin, if you want sharp brakes and a bit more power, then probably just buy the Thruxton. But I do understand people's frustration with the brakes a little bit, and I was watching Baron von Grumble test riding a Street Cup around Spain on a press launch event, and he was saying that, you know, oh, it's red, mate. What the hell? Everyone does that here, look. You got a set of lights there that are green, and then about 10 meters later these ones on red. But he was lucky. Yeah, he was saying that if a bike can do 100 miles an hour, it should probably have 2 discs up front. But these bikes are built to a price, I suppose, and they've got to differentiate all the different models in the range. But it's definitely something to be aware of if you're buying this bike, and, you know, something that you should check out by test riding it and see if it's right for you. I don't hammer it too much around town, so it should be fine, but certainly the pads I'll be looking to upgrade. Another common complaint, and something that people swap out, but this is probably true of most bikes, is the stock suspension. And the rear suspension is particularly noticeable to me. It's kind of immediately quite soft, and then it's quite firm, so it sags quite easily, but then the ride is a little bit more harsh than what I'm used to. And I can play with the preload. You can adjust it on the rear, so I might have a bit more of a go with that. I've tried a few settings and not quite found the right one. And it will also be interesting when my wife can come on the back with me, because I'm sure that we're going to have to put it on the max setting for it to stay, you know, relatively poised. But again, you know, if you're looking for a bike that's great for twisties and for, you know, riding around with your mates who are on sports bikes, then almost certainly you're going to get left behind on this one in terms of everything performance wise. It really is a city bike, and as I said, you can upgrade to Öhlins rear shocks, and you can change the springs in the front forks. Tech Bike Parts make some pretty affordable gas shocks and some springs to go in the front forks. But again, you know, even with cheap ones, as I've said, if you're doing the brakes, you're doing the performance exhaust and filters, you're doing the suspension, you're probably going to take the project up to a cost of a Thruxton or something like that. And I just mentioned, you know, performance and slip-ons and air filters, and I think some people will find the engine a bit puny at the top end. It's really been tuned for low revs torque, around 3,000 revs it peaks, and it's awesome for riding between the lights because you twist and go and it just goes, and you don't really have to think about what gear you're in. But as you get up through the revs, it really dies off, and you can see that in some of the dyno charts that people have posted. It just fades very quickly, and if you ride it on the motorway, it's really noticeable. It sort of doesn't really pull after about 60 miles an hour. I read in the Revzilla review that at the press event when they announced this bike, they said it was going to have 6 gears, but now it's in production, it's only got 5, so that might have been something that would help you get some of that low-end torque by going into 6th gear. I don't know if that would really work, but it's still interesting that they opted to give it 5. But quite clearly, one of the, you know, the main reason it dies off at the top end is just the way that the engine's tuned. And if you watch the Tech Bike Parts video where they dynoed it with various tuning accessories, so as I've said, air filter, slip-on, decat, they couldn't really get more power out of it at the top end, despite it being a big 900 engine with a lot of the same components as the 1200 Thruxton engine and the T120. Until, that is, they redesigned the camshaft, and the kind of supposition is that Triumph have put a restricted camshaft on it to make it a bit slower, so that the 1200 seems a bit faster. I mean, I'm not really sure that I buy that, but the results speak for themselves. If you look at the dyno from all of the modifications that Tech have made and the kind of camshafts, after they added those, it's adding about 12 brake horsepower and quite a lot of torque, and it's right through the rev range as well. You don't really lose much at the bottom end, but the gains are huge at the top end, right the way up to the rev limiter. So that's one thing that might remedy it. It's certainly going to make it feel a little bit more lively if you rev it a bit harder, but I think they're just producing the first batch, so I'll wait and see how that goes. And also my bike's under warranty for another year or so, so I might wait until that's over before I start messing around inside the engine like that. Also, you know, if you are gonna change the motor and make it quicker, then you definitely need to look at the brakes. So those are the main sort of riding factors. It's not a, you know, race bike. I don't think anyone would buy it expecting that, but it's really designed for the town and around town. There are just a few little practical points that maybe irritate me ever so slightly, or that it would be nice to see improved. I mean, one is that it doesn't have a rev counter, and as I've said, it doesn't pull that well at the top end, so you might think you don't really need one. But the bobber runs almost exactly the same clock unit, but when you hit the info button there, it scrolls through, and one of the pages, if you will, or one of the numbers that it will display is a digital rev counter. So that seems like a really good solution to, you know, showing that information, which I like to have. I mean, you don't need it, but every now and again it's nice to be able to see that if you're, you know, cruising at a certain speed and you want to know if you get more economy out of being in a different gear or something like that. Or when you are riding it a bit harder and you're like, well, am I near the rev limit? You know, you'll get in tune with the engine eventually, but it's still nice to be able to see it. And it seems like it's possible, so I don't know if they could ever fix that with like a software update to this bike, but I assume they could. So for me, that would be nice to see. I also find the steering lock a little bit fiddly. Like, it says push and turn, but you don't actually like push and turn simultaneously. You don't push it in and turn it while it's pushed. You push it in and let go and then turn it. To me, it's just a bit of a fiddle, and I don't really get why it works like that. It's also really easy to slip it into the parking lights mode there, which I think, you know, that obviously the bike's got plenty of battery life, but I do leave it sometimes for a few days at the weekend because I normally commute on it, and then we're doing family stuff at the weekend, so it's feasible that I could leave it on the parking lights for a few days if I was being really dozy or if we went away. But the last thing that I am definitely struggling with is that I feel like this bike is designed for town, and I mean, it does a bit of everything, but certainly a lot of people buying this bike will be riding in the city. And if you've been paying any attention to the news or to what's going on other YouTube channels, you'll see that motorcycle crime is absolutely crazy. Last couple of years it's grown massively, and so especially with a new bike like this, you have to be carrying at least one disc lock, if not multiple disc locks. Let's say you know, your bike, you have a kind of mechanical issue and you have to leave it at the side of the road overnight or something. You don't want to be leaving it with just a single disc lock in an area where you don't know if it's safe. Or let's say, you know, you have to go for a meeting or to a shop or something like that, and you're leaving it somewhere that you're not 100% sure is secure. You don't want to be just leaving it with a single disc lock on. So you do have to carry disc locks, and there's just nowhere to stash them on this bike. I could probably get 4 or 5 under the seat on the Kawasaki, and not every bike is going to be like that, but there's just nothing on this bike, which is a little bit frustrating to me. I'm trying to think of a solution. One thing I thought about was fitting one of those tiny batteries that you see, the sort of sports bike ones, and the ones that people use a lot on custom projects to hide the battery, and then using the remaining space to stash disc locks. But they're so expensive, you know, 200-300 quid. That seems like a lot of money. I've also seen quite a few custom Bonnevilles and Triumphs that have a little satchel leather bag where the side cover would go, but it's not really the look I want to go for. And again, they're not cheap to have a handmade piece of leather. They probably don't sell high volumes of those, so they've got to make them fairly expensive. Obviously you can get a top box, but I don't really want to do that because I'm not a massive fan of how they look, and I tend to ride around with this backpack on. But today, like, I've got my tripod in because I want to get some nice shots of the bike for an upcoming video. I've got my camera, I've got my laptop, gym kit, and also like a bunch of disc locks that I take everywhere with me. It's heavy, it's really heavy. I mean, some people say don't be so vain and just get a top box, but I would just really like it if there was a little bit of space for even 1 or 2 disc locks, because they are quite heavy. They've got to be solid, you know, and secure, so they do add quite a lot of weight to this backpack. But anyway, that's a kind of bunch of stuff that I've noticed. Reliability and build quality, I suppose I'll get a better idea of those as time goes on, but for now, you know, I'm really loving this bike, and those are just some minor factors that perhaps slight niggles. Let me know if you guys got any questions in the comments down below. Any videos you want to see about the Street Twin, I'm keen to make some more, so, you know, let me know. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, then click subscribe.